right. The chimes indicate that we're starting right now. Thank you very much. When Daf Mem Vav Amud Bet, we just to remind you what we've been talking about and where we're going tonight. I hope tonight we're going to open this packet that I handed out here in person for those who are here, and welcome everyone. And for those online, I'm going to put it up on the screen. If you open the Gemara Mem Vav Amud Bet, just to remind you, our sugya that we were trying to unpack is a three-way discussion about the degree to which the mitzvah objects focused until now on lulav. Tonight we're going to transition, talk about Sukka as well. To what extent they continue to retain their status as mitzvah objects beyond their usage on the last day. So yes, no, and the third option is not only the rest of that day, but maybe even the next day, right? And that is going to be the segue into the new sugya. So we had Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, and then Levi. Those were the three opinions that we saw. Rabbi Yochanan holds the whole day that you, after you used it, also cannot use it for your purpose, but the next day you can. Reish Lakish says as soon as you finish doing the mitzvah with that item, it loses its status immediately, and you can make jam out of it. We're talking about, let's say, the etrog. Levi said even the 8th day, and that's where we're going to open our discussion tonight, to try to understand what is Levi's rationale. We saw previously that Rashi had explained Levi's rationale. If you look at the Gemara, someone already has their hand up. I didn't even start yet. I'm only 2 minutes in. No,
Rabbi Larry.
Oh. Yeah.
Hi. Before you got into it, I'm curious. You said you're done with it. You can make jam out of it, but it was the davar shebikdusha. So how can you treat it in such a mundane way?
That's the machloket. Reish Lakish says you finished doing the mitzvah with it. So it doesn't have inherent kedusha. Remember, the only objects for us that have inherent kedusha as objects, movables that exist, are objects that it contain the Shem Hashem written in them. Sefer Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzah, Stam. Sefer Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzah. Everything else is huktzah, has kedushat mitzvah, but not gufan kadosh. It's a very important distinction. There's all different gradations and discussions, right? Then we have tashmishe kedusha and tashmishe mitzvah, objects that are pertinences to the actual objects. I don't want to take us off topic. The point here is, and I'm glad you brought it up, just to clarify, Reish Lakish says that status ends the minute you finish doing the mitzvah. Rabbi Yochanan says, well, it at least extends during the day. You can't say it dissipated. It's still, whether because someone else could use it, whether because it retains the status, because that's how the day started and it continues. And Levi wants to argue it even goes to the next day. And if you look at Rashi right here on his view about that 8th day, Shmini Asura, we saw this already. Rashi had pointed this out. Just to orient you, I'm on 46b, probably about 15 lines up from the bottom in the Gemara. If you follow your eye along to the inside of the page, the Brahamatchil first word on the line is etrog afilu b'shmini asura. That was Levi's position. We already saw it in the Gemara a few times, so I'm not belaboring the point to read the whole Gemara again. We did this already last time and the time before. Rashi explains migo de asiro ben hashmashot de shmini mishum de ben hashmashot safek yom hu. So, since it is forbidden bein hashmashot of the 8th day, 7th going to the 8th day, since bein hashmashot is it 7, is it 8? So since it's bein hashmashot and kaven to bein hashmashot asura, since it's forbidden during the the period that is twilight in between sunset and dusk, so even though you would no longer really be doing the mitzvah, Rashi says, of the Daled Minim, not the Sukkah. We're talking just about Daled Minim in this case. The reality is that during the Ben Hashmashot period, which maybe is part of the 7th day still, Levi just says, well, I follow Rabbi Yochanan's approach. I just take it a little farther, a few minutes later. And then I invoke the principle that once in Ben Hashmashot something is muktzah, it's automatically muktzah for the next day. That's generally true about muktzah. In the world of muktzah, that's the rule. Generally, migo dit katsoy ben hashmashot, huktzah l'kuliyoma. If it was muktzah on ben hashmashot, it's going to be muktzah for the entire day. That was an interesting switch. Okay, welcome. Tosfot didn't agree with Rashi. Rashi thinks Levi thinks that once it goes a little bit, dips into Ben Hashmashot, which is the day that the span of time bridging 2 days, so automatically the 8th day has to be included. But Tosfot disagreed, and it's a small Tosfot, the second Tosfot here, Etrog Afilu B'Shmini Asura. It's the third one up from the bottom, I guess, on this page. Small Tosfot. The Gazar Etrog Atu Sukka, right? Essentially, we're concerned not really about the etrog, according to Tosfot. The reason why Levi claims you cannot use the etrog on the 8th day is because Levi maintains, as actually everyone seems to maintain, the sukkah is forbidden on the 8th day. And if we will allow people on the 8th day to use the etrog and yet tell them the sukkah is usher, they'll end up using the sukkah too. So we make a blanket rule saying any of the Devivrei mitzvah related to sukkahs is off limits on day 8. That's Levi's position. That's what he wants to argue. Rabbi Reish Lakish, no problem. I already told you that once you finish doing the mitzvah on day 7, you're done with it. You can do whatever you want. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, you have to at least wait till the end of that day. However, both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish agreed that the 8th day for Sukkah is prohibited. Why? We saw why. If it's after sunset on day 7 in Israel, after sunset on day 7, going into day 8, the reality is that if you had ate a meal at that time, that was the toast that we saw, the Itrame le seudata. If the meal had come up at that time, you would be obligated to go into the Sukkah and eat there. If the mitzvah of lulav, someone asked, well, what if the lulav mitzvah? Well, you should have done it earlier in the day. What are you waiting for Bein Hashmashot? And by the by in Bein Hashmashot, can you still make a bracha on the lulav? That's a question, because maybe the mitzvah is finished completely. Sukkah would also be a bit of a question, but you'd have at least a chiyuv to eat the meal, again, after sunset on day 7, going into day 8, to eat there. Therefore, Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, and Levi all agree that the next day, you cannot use the sukkah. Levi's just saying, you're setting people up for failure. If you're going to tell people sukkah no, but etrog yes, they're going to say, come on, I can use the sukkah. I can take it apart or whatever it is, you know?
So then
Yeah.
Reish Lakish would be consistent with that opinion because they're much on both.
No, right, but Reish, for etrog.
If
Yeah,
you're saying-
right.
So we have
In a certain way, he's very consistent.
right.
Rabbi Yochanan's least consistent, you could say.
Two things going on here, right? The comparison with Sukkah
Yeah,
and the desire to have both
I'll make sure everyone can hear us.
both be the same,
Right,
right? 'Cause if
Right.
they're different.
that's Tosfot.
That's Tosfot.
Tosfot thinks that's what Levi is trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah. So so that's what Tosfot explained.
It's interesting that if Levi were trying to do that, no one else would say that. That's just sort of a weird.
Wait, Levi did say that is what
No,
Levi says.
Levi's having usher by both.
Right.
And Tosfot's opinion is that it's to make it equal between how you treat Sukkah and how you treat. the
Correct.
Shmini,
Correct.
Right. So if you're saying, which is kind of, I think a normative thing to say, we want them both to be the same, right? So now that
Makes for better policy.
Rabbi Yochanan a little bit weirder, right?
Yeah,
Because you
And Tosfot's
and
rendering.
Reish Lakish would be a little bit more normative. If you because they
Right.
Reish Lakish treats both the same.
No, Reish Lakish does not, because Reish Lakish says also on day 8 you cannot use the sukkah.
Oh, okay. So
Look on the top of page 46b.
Sorry, my
Yeah,
chart was-
6 lines down. Your chart had one error on it, but fundamentally what you're saying is correct. And let me
my
just
chart is
reframe.
only about Lulav.
Oh, yeah, no, now we were jumping over to Sukkah, though.
Yeah.
That's what Tosfot's doing. Let me say it in conceptual terms to understand. Rashi thinks that what Levi is telling us is something fundamental about the Lulav and Etrog. Fundamentally, since it is in the Ben Hashmashot period still Muktzah, therefore the Muktzah status automatically extends the entire day. Tosfot say, they disagreeing with Rashi. How do we know disagree? Because they didn't quote Rashi. They said something else. If they wanted to say what Rashi said, Tosfot has Rashi in front of it. The Bali Tosfot have access to Rashi in most instances. Although we saw an example where maybe they didn't have one particular aspect of the manuscript, might have written by a Talmud. We saw that earlier with the quote of that Medrash about the Chassid grabbing the old Etrog and putting on his back and going out to make a lot of money, according to the Medrash. Anyway, but according to Tosfot, fundamentally for Levi, really the 8th day, the Etrog should be mutter, just like Rabbi Yochanan. But you know what? Policy issues. If I don't announced that everything is off limits, the people will end up using the sukkah. They're not allowed to do that. Are they really allowed to use the etrog? Yeah, they're really allowed to. Rashi says, no, that's not what Levi's saying. Levi's saying fundamentally, you cannot use the etrog because it is still huktzah mitzvato. Why? Because bein hashmashot, going into the 8th day, it was huktzah mitzvato. And kevan de itkatzai bein hashmashot, since it was muktzah in the bein hashmashot period, itkatzai lekula yoma, it's for the whole day. That brings us to the world of the Ritva. If you open this packet that I handed out last week, and then I took it back, page 1 of the packet, there's an arrow where it talks about Levi right there. And of course, for those at home, you don't have to go anywhere. Stay right in your seats. There you are. Okay, the magic of Zoom. You should have it. Do you not have it from last week? I have another packet here if you want it. Ira, you have? Hold on. I got packets. I don't know. I think gave it out. It doesn't matter. Now, if we're looking here, the page should say Tuf Lamed, or the Tuf Chavtat. This is the number 1 at the bottom, written in pen, number 1, you see? Yes? I'm where the arrow is, Levi Amar.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm sorry. I think I left out a piece that I have to tell you before we do the Ritva. I think it's going to be a problem. Yeah, it's going to be a little problem. Okay, sorry. A false start on my part. If you look at look at the Gemara, we'll have to relearn a little part of the Gemara to the end of the Gemara here in order to understand what's happening. We had Levi's shita, right? And once we presented Levi's shita, we had Abaye got into the mix, and Abaye pointed out that that there's going to be a distinction between what happens in Eretz Yisrael and what happens in Chutz La'aretz. Why? Because in Eretz Yisrael, there isn't the concept of Shmini, Safek, Shvii. When it's the 8th day, it's the 8th day. When it's the 7th day, it's the 7th day. But Abaye pointed out that there is a moment where in Chutz La'aretz, we're not sure if it's the 7th day or the 8th day. If you look with me in the Gemara, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 lines up from the bottom. Ve'anan. Yeah. Okay, so it says there Ve'anan, to eat Ve'anan, and we in Bavel. The narrow lines, Gemara from the bottom of the narrow lines, 8 lines up. Ve'anan, to eat lan, Trey Yom Hecha Avdinan. What do we do now that we have 2 days in Chutz La'aretz for Yom Tov? We have a day 8 and a day 9. Shmini Atzeret is 2 days. Shmini Atzeret Simchas Torah is called day 8 and day 9 of Sukkot, really. Amar Abaye, Shmini Safek Shvii, Aser. On the 8th day, which is the Safek of the 7th day, it's forbidden. She Safek Shmini, Mutter. All right, but when you have the 9th day, which is Safek, the 8th day, so that's going to be permissible. Maremar, Amar Maremar disagreed, and Maremar says Afilu Shmini Safek Shvii, Mutter. Even on the 8th day, which is Safek, the 7th day, because it's the 8th day, the 8th day, or the 8th day, the 7th day, right? That's the Sfeik of the Yoma. He thinks it's mutter. That's Maremar's approach. Besura Avde ke Maremar. In Surah, they followed Maremar. Rav Shesha Bered Rav Idi Avid ke Abaye. It tells you the name of another Chacham who followed Abaye. Behilchata ke Abaye. And the halacha follows Abaye, period. Namely, in Chutz La'aretz, on the 8th day, which might really be the 7th day, we have to maintain that the lulav is aser. Whose position is that? Well, it's not entirely clear. Levi wanted to argue that in Eretz Yisrael on the 8th day it should be forbidden. Abaye said, 8th day, which may be the 7th day, it's aser, but 9th day, which may be the 8th day, it's mutter. In other words, if the 8th day is really the 7th day, okay, Shmini Atzeret is really the 7th day halachically, and if the 7th day is going to the 8th day in Bein Hashmashot, wouldn't you imagine that the next day, the 9th day, should also be Aser according to Levi's Shita? We don't follow Levi's Shita clearly in Abaye's iteration, because Abaye holds on this 8th day called Shmini, Safek Shvii, which could be really the 7th day. It's Aser, because it might be the 7th day really. So it's fake of the Yoma. It's like Rabbi Yochanan. It's Rabbi Yochanan's position, not Reish Lakish. And then the next day, Shmini, Safek Shvii, Safek Shmini, ninth day, which may be the eighth day, Abai says that's totally mutter. So that's like Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. When Levi's position was quoted earlier, the Ritva, of course, assumed that you know Shas. So the Ritva starts describing the situation according to Abai. He points out here, now we're in the Ritva. Levi Amar Etrog B'Shmini Nami Asura. Lo ate alemi tama de Abaye. This does not follow Abaye's view. Midamrin Lakaman, because it says further along, Uladidan, and for us, meaning in Chutz La'aretz, Da'avdin and Treyome, Chet, B'Chet, Safek, Zion, eighth day might be the seventh day, Mai. But Allah Ata Abaye said, right, what he said, which is, right, we said the eighth, seventh, which may be the eighth, yes, ninth day, which may be the eighth, no, i.e., not like Levi, because Levi should hold, if you follow Levi's approach, the ninth day, which could be the eighth day, should also be Asr. Remember, he said the whole eighth day is Asr, right? So, Michlal dehashta lo ayri b'hachi. It must be that now we're not, when Levi is speaking, we're not talking about that case. The Inkain, Tmiya Milta Tuva, my time at Levi. So now we're trying to understand what actually is the rationale of Levi, right? Because we don't accommodate Levi's position when we get to Abaye talking about Chutz La'aretz. So Tosfot said, now we're back, Ritva says, I really like Tosfot's view. If you took Rashi's view, how come Abaye didn't have to account for Levi's position? But if you, right, because what did Levi hold according to Rashi? Migod itkatsai b'bein hashmashot itkatsai l'kula yoma. But what did Tosfot say? Fundamentally, no. But procedurally, public policy, I'm calling it, Gzeira atu Sukka. We're worried if you're going to split between the Etrog and the Sukka, not going to be good. So, but Tosfot tirtzu, the Levi migzeira de Sukka hu de Asra, the Ishart be'etrog atu lemishrei beSukka. Just quoted Tosfot, we just said. You'll end up being matir Sukka as well, and that wouldn't be a good idea, right? And in other words, if that's really what you hold, then the ninth day, which is really maybe the eighth day, you can disregard it, because on the ninth day of Sukkot, Simchas Torah, nobody holds that you have to use your Sukkah. Au contraire, you definitely don't use a Sukkah, either because it's after Sukkot, or because luckily it's really Shmini Atzeret, in which case you don't sit in the Sukkah. So either way, nobody holds you sit in the Sukkah Shmini Atzeret on Simchas Torah. Therefore, nobody needs to hold, nobody's worried that you're going to take the etrog and then you'll say, oh, and I can go in the Sukkah. You can go in the Sukkah on the ninth day, on Arsh Simchas Torah. That's not Shmini Atzeret. It's Simchas Torah. Maybe it's Shmini Atzeret, but if it's really, either it's after Yontif or it's Shmini Atzeret, you don't follow what I'm saying? Either Yontif is over and we added an extra day, ninth day, on an 8-day festival, or that ninth day is really luckily the 8th day, but it's not luckily possibly the 7th day. So the Ritva basically points out what Levi has explained. You understand why Levi, in Tosfot's understanding of Levi, was not carried over into the case of Shvii, Safek Shmini, ninth, which may be the 8th. V'acherim pirshu, the Levi savar, de kevan de b'mikdash shemitzvata kol shiva, yesh lo litla bein hashmash lo nitla b'shachar. He does not say who this is, but the Ritva quotes acherim. From Seville, he says acherim. Other people say, Levi holds. Why does Levi really think? This is not Rashi. This is not Tosfot. This is Acherim. The Acherim hold. Why does Levi really fundamentally say the 8th day in Israel, you can't use your etrog? Because if someone in the Beit HaMikdash is standing in the Beit HaMikdash, the sun already set on the 7th day of Sukkot, and they want to take the lulav of the etrog, may they take it? Absolutely. Because in the Beit HaMikdash, all 7 days, it's a mitzvah deoraita. Safek deoraita l'chumra. We don't know, is it the 7th day, is it the 8th day, but it's a mitzvah deoraita in the Beit HaMikdash, all 7 days. Let him take the lulav on the 7th day, even after sunset, Safek deoraita l'chumra. That's what he writes. Oh, kol hayom, right? You didn't take it in the morning. Oh, kol hayom, mishum dehavis feka deoraita. V'ishtakach ditkatzai l'bein hashmash midina. Remember when we just said a few minutes ago, what's the story with the sukkah? Why does everyone, Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, and Rabbi Levi, and Levi, they all agree that the 8th day on Shmini Atzeret, you're not allowed to be in your sukkah. Why not? You can't use the parts of the sukkah. Why not? So the explanation was, since if you had a meal that came your way after sunset from the 7th day into the 8th day, you would need to go in your sukkah. So too, the whole 8th day, it's muktzah. So why didn't they say that about the etrog and the lulav? Because most people don't live in the Beit HaMikdash. The acherim, whoever they are quoted by the Ritva as saying, but if you were standing in the Beit HaMikdash, The same way you have a biblical mitzvah to go in the sukkah, you still have a biblical mitzvah in the Beit HaMikdash to take the daled minim on the last day of Sukkot, even after sunset. Safek d'oraita l'chumra, because it's still a usmachim lifnei Hashem l'keichem shivat yamim. The Torah says you have to rejoice before God 7 full days. So that's Medina. On the second to last line in that first right-hand column, right? Third to last line. It's a din now that tells you that it's muktzah bein hashmash between 7th to the 8th day. Gazar Levi, the titzar b'shmini. It should also be usher on the 8th day. Shemaheri yibana Beit HaMikdash. Soon, immediately, speedily in our day, the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt. And you know what everyone's going to say when Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt? V'yomru eshtakad. They'll say last year rather, lo achal b'shmini hashtanami neichol. Right? Last year. Right? You understand? We didn't eat on the 8th. So now also, right? We can do it. So we don't want to do that. So we're saying since the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt and the daled minim is going to itself be a mitzvah deoraita again, because people will be able to go to the Beit HaMikdash. So every year, Levi says we have to be worried. This might be the last year without the Beit HaMikdash. By next year there will be, and people will be saying to each other, "Well, last year when we didn't have a Beit HaMikdash, you let me eat my etrog on the 8th day. So what's wrong now?" Yeah, right. So no, you shouldn't do that. It's a rhetorical statement. It's not a right. Eshtakad milo achalnu b'shmini. Didn't we eat on the 8th? So hashtanami nechli. No, that would be totally forbidden. So Levi says blanket policy according to the Acherim, the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt, and when it's rebuilt, God willing, it means that there still will be a place in the world where after Ben Hashmashot, you're not allowed to use the etrog because you could still use it for the mitzvah purpose, the oraita. The Ritva himself did not necessarily agree with the Acherim. He doesn't dispute them. He just says, V'hanachon, what I think, if you look at footnote 262, it tells you, this amazing, the Ritva from Osada Rav Kook, tells you, V'chein dat Rashi, and see also Tosfot. So elsewhere. V'hanachon, the Levi Medina asa le'af bizman hazeh. The truth is the Ritva, I agree with Rashi, Levi asered it Medina, not because of the Beit HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt, as the Acherim said, not like Tosfot said, because you're going to cause confusion. How come the Sukkah no and the Etrog yes? But he thought Medina. The Svar Lek Rabbi Yochanan, the Lekula Yoma Eit Katzoi, the Af Lebein Hashmashet Misafek Shvii. The underlined words here, the highlighted words, if I had a highlighter, I think I have a highlighter. I have a highlighter. I'm going to use the highlighter. Haven't used this in quite a long time, so you'll forgive me. But it's here. It's the last words, V'af Lebein Hashmashot. That misafek shvi. That's where he disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says the whole 7th day, even after you did the mitzvah at 7:30 in the morning at the early minyan, great. Now you're going to come to sunset, it's over. Ben Hashmashot, it's yours. Levi says, excuse me, but even Ben Hashmashot, isn't that Safek shvi? We hold that way for Sukkah. Fundamentally, it's asafek kasavar nami shekol mashaneser Ben Hashmashot erev yamtiv omi dina mamash omi shum chumra. Either way. There's no such thing as setting something aside for half a day. Ergo, it was set aside for the whole day. Ergo, it's a done deal. It's set, finished. You can't use it the whole day. That's the approach of the Ritva, agreeing with Rashi that fundamentally you cannot use the etrog on day 8 of Yom Tov in Eretz Yisrael. Can we go to the next piece in the Gemara? Okay, everyone with me? Now we're going to the next sugya. Okay, so wait, it's I made a mistake. It's almost the next sugya. There's one more thing. I'm sorry. And look at page 2. I said I forgot. The Rambam and the Rav. The Rambam and the Rav now. So the Rambam, page 2. If you don't have it in front of you, I have it for you right here. Page 2. The Rambam. This is the Rambam, the end of Perek Zayin of Hilchot Lulav, Halacha Chaf Zayin. Is the first of the wide lines, yeah? In Tosfot, first paragraph of Rambam, first of the wide lines. V'asur lechol etro kol yom hashvi. Why? Mipnei shehuktzah lemiktzat hayom huktzah lekula. Whose shita is that? Reish Lakish or Rabbi Yochanan? Yeah, Rabbi Yochanan, right? Because it was huktzah. It was muktzah for part of the day. It's muktzah the whole day. Now, uva Shmini mutar b'achila. On the 8th day, you're allowed to eat it. Who's that? Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, or Levi?
Well, Reish Lakish for sure.
Rosh Lakish for sure,
Yochanan also.
and Rabbi Yochanan also. The only one who says no is Levi. Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yochanan, it seems like, because that's the previous box. He said the rest of the day it's muktzah, so that was Rabbi Yochanan. Uvizman hazeh, the Rambam writes, Sha'anu osim shnei yamim. Now he's talking about chutz la'aretz. We do 2 days. Afal pishein notlin lulav v'shmini. Even though we don't take the lulav on the 8th day, on Shmini Atzeret, nonetheless, he says, ha'etrog aser b'shmini. It's forbidden on the 8th day. Kederach shahaya asur b'shmini bizman shahayu osin shnei yamim pnei hasafek shu safek shvii. It's aser on the 8th day in chutz la'aretz, just like it was forbidden on the 8th day in times when they did 2 days of Yom Tov and Chutz La'aretz because of Sfeika Diyoma, when the 8th day may really be the 7th day. You're not allowed to use it. You don't take the lulav and etrog, but you're also not allowed to use it. The Rambam also throws in, Hifri Shiva etrogin l'shivat yamim, kol achat v'achat yotzei baliyoma, v'uchla l'machar. If you had 7 etrogim and you thought they looked delicious, and you used one today, and you designated one for tomorrow, then tomorrow, the new one's for the mitzvah, and the one from yesterday you can eat because it's not the same day anymore. That's not germane to our conversation exactly at this moment, although somebody's trying to do a lot with it. I kind of glossed over it because there's another discussion, but here the Rambam pointed out, I hold like Rabbi Yochanan, but in Chutz La'aretz, I think that it's usher on the 8th day, even though there isn't the idea of making 2 days because of Safek. But because there was a time when they had 2 days of Safek, I'm going to say the 8th day, it's usher to use.
Okay.
In Chutz La'aretz.
Do we pencil this lineup etroging thing for another time? Because it doesn't make sense to me. Because if the etrog has kedusha,
Yep.
it has kedusha. The fact that that particular etrog that I made the bracha on, I don't need that etrog for tomorrow. I have a new one.
Where did the Kedusha
The
go?
kedusha didn't go away.
So that's what we're debating. That's what Larry asked me when we started. The next day, remember, unlike, yeah. You just got nafal simon now, like the click. So no, but Larry had pointed out at the beginning. It was a brilliant point because it framed the whole thing. Unlike the Sukka, which is one continuous mitzvah, the lulav is 7 discrete mitzvahs. Every night the mitzvah is ended, and the next day is a new mitzvah.
But
Understand?
But that doesn't matter. If it has kedusha.
Oh,
then
okay.
it retains its kedusha, even if I don't need it for the mitzvah.
You would think, but that's what I was saying. The only objects that retain their kedusha beyond their mitzvah usage.
You said that when we started.
Right.
I heard that and I remembered that, but I was thinking about my hollis, my tefillin bag.
Okay.
Which is not the goof.
Right.
And yet still it retains kedusha.
Okay.
Because I'm
Yes.
using it
Yes.
to
Yeah.
tote my
No, you
one.
cannot. Okay.
So
Let me explain. Okay, I got it. Let me explain. There's the object that's gufan kadosh, and any appurtenance that is attached to it. So the bendel that goes in the Sefer Torah, the plastic boxes, and the bag that you put your tefillin in are called tashmishe kedusha. They retain kedusha even beyond the mitzvah object's use because those objects are gufan kadosh. Not so the straps, by the way, on the tefillin. Those are not tashmishe kedusha, according to Rav Soloveitchik and others. That is kedusha because it's physically attached to the object kedusha, the ritzur. That's why you have to be careful when you sit down. The ritzur shouldn't go on the floor because they're gufa. It's like putting the tefillin on the floor. It's pretty much on a par with it. You shouldn't do that. Now, sometimes you see people like they drag them around. So tuck it in your belt or something. Whatever you have to do. But
it's like when you take it off too, you shouldn't.
it's taking it off also. You shouldn't go on the floor. A lot of people, I say, they take off the tefillin. With the straps, the whole thing goes on the floor, and they're doing it on the floor. Lo yitachen. It's gufan kadosh. The ritzuot are attached. The ritzuot are attached. Once you now, the objects of mitzvah that we have, like a talis, like tzitzis generally, a talit katan or something, like a schach, like a lulav, like a tzedakah box, maybe any of those objects. Although tzedakah box is even probably less so. Do not retain their aspect of kedusha at all after you're done with the mitzvah. That doesn't mean you treat it in a degenerate manner. The minhag Yisrael is in fact to put into geniza a talis and a talis cotton. We put in geniza. But if you were to, if we had a shortage or something, we had to make a triage. How do you know? That's why you can wear the talis cotton goes with you in the bathroom. We have a minhag. We don't bring the talis gadol into the bathroom. That's a minhag already. We just don't do it. Especially with tefillah, the kittel also. You don't wear a kittel really in a bathroom. But really halachically, the object does not have inherent kedusha. That's what's going on here. And the debate is, well, how long does the kedusha keep going when you've already done the mitzvah with it? So Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, Levi. But the end of the Rambam is just saying, if you set aside and designate 7 different etrogim for each of the 7 days, you would use it that day for the mitzvah. You need to wait till tomorrow, but the next day, that's Rabbi Yochanan's shita, the original object does not retain its kedusha. I say again, don't you misunderstand chas v'shalom. I'm not suggesting, it's not a big deal. You can put your tzitzis or something in the garbage. Chas v'chalila. The minhag Yisrael is we put it in the geniza, but we should understand it's not because gufan kadosh. Your schach, people have schach. The schach doesn't have inherent kedusha. It's only when using it for the mitzvah. It's not to say a person should use it for something that's the dvar bizayon. Chanukiah does not have nothing. Zilch, nothing. The oil, by the way, that's something else. If you designated the oil for that purpose, so there's a little bit of a question because of some of the. It has to do with, we'll get into it in Hanukkah. Maybe the oil, if you designated it, maybe that oil does retain something beyond its usage because it was designated for the purpose of the mitzvah, and it's connected to the whole notion of hekdesh and the menorah and the chanukiyah. There's a whole thing there, maybe sort of like part of what's going on. But the menorah, the chanukiyah, shum davar. Chanukiyah, the minhag is not to put it in geniza. To be honest, if it breaks, you put it in a bag nicely, and it's just not the minhag. Menorahs, things like that, that doesn't go. But you should understand that there is a distinction between these two things. The space of the Beit Knesset has a special kedusha. We talked extensively about that previously. You did it a few times in Dvar Halacha, Divrei Halacha, and different times. But that's its own din having to do with the Beit Knesset, the furniture in the Beit Knesset, and what's attached to the ground, and what's not, and what's designated, what's not. That's another thing. But the lulav, after it's over, it's over. That's the point we're making. It's like it's a fruit, the etrog. That is a very important status as long as you need it for Dvar Mitzvah. Once that's over, okay, when is it over? So what the Rambam did here was, let's go back just to the beginning of this Rambam. He holds like Rabbi Yochanan, but he does point out that just so you realize that in nowadays where we do 2 days of Yom Tov, even though we don't take the lulav on the 8th day, nonetheless, the etrog's forbidden on the 8th day. Why? Because it's just like it was forbidden on the 8th day in times when they made 2 days of Yom Tov because of Safek. Now, what does that mean? What is he driving at? Next page 3, flip it, page 3. This is the Rishimot Shiurei HaGrid, Maran Agon, Harav Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik. I am on the left side of the page, the last paragraph on the left side of the page where it says Sham. We can't learn the whole thing here. There was too much going on, so I chose this one, okay? Sham means on Mem Vav Amud Bet. Tosfot Dibur Matchil Shmini. The truth is, this Tosfot Dibur Matchil Shmini is we didn't actually read it. We probably should have seen it inside in order to understand what's going on here. So sorry, we're learning a second Tosfot before we get to this. It's the bottom Tosfot on page Mem Vav Amud Bet. It's very short. Shmini Safek Shvii Aser on the 8th day, which is the Safek of the 7th day. It's Aser. Be'eretz Yisrael, the Leka Sveka, Lo Gazur Atur Sukka. This is exactly what Tosfot are explaining here is in line with what they said about Levi's Shita. They're now explaining in Abaye's Shita. Remember, we just learned when we started the shir tonight, Abaye had said that in Chutz La'aretz, on the 8th day, which is a Safek Shvii, we don't use the etrog because it might be the 7th. Be'eretz Yisrael deleka sveka lo gazer atu sukkah aval bebavel deika sveka afal gab de lo mevarech bei. Even though we don't make a bracha on the 8th day, which may really be the 7th day, gazer atu sukkah. We make a gzeira because of sukkah, i.e., that we still say it's usher on Shmini Atzeret to use your etrog in Chutz La'aretz. Aval chi Safek Shmini lo gazer etrog atu sukkah. On the 9th day, which may really be the 8th day, there's no reason to have a gzeira against the etrog, because there's no concern about going down the road of saying you could use your sukkah, because you can use your sukkah on the 9th day because it's Simchas Torah, not Shmini Atzeret anymore. Yeah, everyone with me? Okay, now look at the Rav.
Oh, wait, you can't use your sukkah on.
You don't sit in it, right? You don't sit in it.
So in other words.
If you
because
wanted to,
If you said you wanted to do a kiddush, and you said, oh, I want to use my sukkah for a kiddush, you can't do that.
that is true, and I'll remind you the assumption here, because they're a little bit back into a corner. What does it mean to use sukkah? It means to use pieces of the sukkah, like to burn it for firewood or something like that. But the question came up, wait a second, but you can't take it apart in Ohel on Shabbos or Yontif. So what's the case? So we came up with, right? It said that it fell down right before Yontif, and therefore you can't actually sit in it, but could use the material now that it's not assembled. Well, no, because it's still Hutzil Mitzvato until when? Till it's totally over. So the ninth day, technically, if you made a bonfire, because your point is well taken. In Chutz La'aretz, by the way, you're not allowed to go in the sukkah on the ninth day, because that would be a Baal Tosif problem. All right, the ninth day on Simchas Torah, we get this every year. I get the same question almost every year from someone. We should make the Kiddush on Simchas Torah in the sukkah. Tell them, no, that's actually the only day you cannot do it in the sukkah, because you're not allowed to be in the sukkah that day. Right? Shmini Atzeret, it's a little confusing. I've explained to Carlos that on Shmini Atzeret, yes, and the next day, no. What's the difference one day to the next? I can't explain it. It's too complicated. We're going to show them Tosfos over here. But what they're talking about in these cases, I'm glad you brought it up to clarify. It must be that the sukkah had fallen down. They didn't clean it up before Yom Tov. So now the ninth day, which may be the eighth day, you can take it for firewood. And that's true too today. That's true today. It's just you can't use it as the space of the sukkah because that could be a Baal Tosif problem. Tosfot, the Rav here quoted Tosfot, and then he said, "Lit Tosfot Isser shel etrog bechet hu gzera atu sukkah." The whole Isser in Chutz La'aretz of using the sukkah, of using the etrog, on the eighth day, is because we're worried then you're going to use the sukkah. So we say, right, the sukkah is huktzah mitzvato, etc. Bram, however, la Rambam yesh derech acheret b'isurei ha'etrog b'shmini. However, the Rambam showed us another way to understand the Isser of the etrog on the eighth day. V'zel shono. And he quotes the Rambam here. I'm just going to read it. We translated it already 3 times. It's our halach we just learned. Afal pisha notli lulav b'shmini ha'etrog asur b'shmini kederach sheya asur b'shmini bizman shayu osim shnei yamim pnei Safek shehu Safek Shvii ad kan l'sono. That was the Rambam. We saw that already. La Rambam, says the Rav. La Rambam bizman ha're'iyah. At the time when they had witnesses going out to Mekadesh the Chodesh, they had to wait for the witnesses to come to get to the Beit Din, right? Shahaya Safek, it really was a Safek in those days. There was no calendrical system. Literally, the people who were waiting, are the witnesses going to show up and tell us when Rosh Chodesh was to know where to start Yontif? So it was a real Safek. Hayunotlin at Adal Minim Safek biyom Shmini. V'haminim hayu asurim midin muktzah. In the time of the Re'iyah, when they had witnesses, when it really was a Safek, and they didn't know, they would take the Dalad Minim Safek on the 8th day, but the Minim were really forbidden because they were really Muktzah.
I assume without a bracha.
Yeah. Yes. Without a bracha. In the olden days, not us. Back when there's still Mekadesh al pi Re'iyah. Because then it was actually a Safek at the Yomer. It actually really was real. But the Rav continues, Bizman hazeh, nowadays, the Rambam meant to say, Bizman hazeh, she'anu b'kiyam b'kviyah diarcha, we know exactly how the calendar works, ein notlim, we don't take the lulav and etrog on the 8th day on Shmini Atzeret, even though it's the 8th day, which may be the 7th day, we don't do that. Im kol zeh, midin minag avotechem b'yadechem, yesh chalot muktzah alaminim. Nonetheless, because of the idea of minag avotechem b'yadechem, of how it used to be, when there was a kiddush al pi re'iyah using the witnesses, we therefore minag avotechem b'yadechem, we say we continue the idea that these objects are still muktzah for the purpose of mitzvah, even though we're not going to do the mitzvah. The ayin b'tosfot, go see the Tosfot on Mem Zayin Amud Aleph on 47a. We didn't see it yet. They'll explain, Tosfot, why we don't take in our day the dalad minim on the 8th day. We don't. Why not? We sit in the sukkah, according to the Gemara, we're going to see shortly. We won't see that tonight. All right? Haramba machalik ben netilah lulav l'din muktzah she'alav. The minhag avotechem ein mechayiv netilah aval oser b'muktzah. The Rambam differentiates between taking the lulav as an action versus the fact that it's muktzah l'mitzvato. The minhag avotechem b'yadechem is not enough to bring us to taking the lulav on the 8th day, Safek the 7th day. Why? Because we have a calendar now. But we still retain the muktzah dimension for the Rambam, we retain the muktzah dimension that used to be the case when it really was a sfeika diyoma. So now we have Rashi, Tosfot, Ritva in the name of the Acherim. The Ritva himself seems to agree with Rashi. And we have the Rambam's view that maybe the whole idea, it's not exactly, the Rambam's view is not exactly on Levi, just in general. Why on the 8th day can't we use it now? Because we're not going to take the lulav in our hand. So why can't we use it? The answer is, and the Rav derived it from the language of the Rambam, right? That he mentioned with Zman Zishana Os Mishnei Yom Af Al Pi She'ein Notin Lulav B'Shmini Ha'etrog Asa B'Shmini. He writes Kederach Shaya Asur B'Shmini B'Zman Shaya Os Mishnei Yom Pnei Safek. We don't take the lulav and the etrog, but we also consider it forbidden. Why do we also consider it forbidden even now, when we have a calendar? The answer is because back in the day, it really was a sfeika diyoma. And since they considered it muktzah in those days, we consider it muktzah. So begs the question, so then why don't we, according to that logic, take the lulav and the etrog on the 8th day, which is maybe the 7th day? Why don't we do that? So the Rav says for that, you want to understand why the Rambam would say not to. It's the same idea as what Tosfot propounds on the top of 47a. I'll do something totally out of character because we only have very little time left, very little time for the shir, and I have to run again as usual. But look at the top lines of Tosfot 47a. We didn't even learn the Gemara yet, so I'll just tell you the Gemara is that in Chutz La'aretz there's a discussion sitting in the Sukkah on the 8th day in Shmini Atzeret, which may really be the 7th day. Okay. So the Gemara here, the Tosfot here, top of 47a, say, first time we're ever learning a Tosfot before we actually even saw the Gemara, but it's comprehensible. Balulav loratz lotakin klal sheyitlenu halulav misafek, right? And the lulav, they didn't want to make any kind of takana at all to take the lulav out of a sense of Safek. You know why? Lefishu yomtiv, because it's yomtiv, the 8th day. Umuktzah letiltul. You're not allowed to just stomp, pick up a lulav on yomtiv to play around with it if it's not sukkahs. On Pesach, you can't pick up a lulav. It's muktzah, an object. So this is Shmini Atzeret. It's not sukkahs anymore. Umin karil milte shenoig bo minig chol. It would be obvious by picking it up, you would be declaring this is the minig of chol, or at least it's a minig of sukkahs, right? Not the minig of Shmini Atzeret. Aval sukkah, but when it comes to sukkah, sometimes a person likes to have a sukkah. They have a sukkah in July. They sit in the sukkah because it's nice to sit in the sukkah. It's shady. So it's not as obvious that it's countermanding, that's Tosfot's view, the notion of the Yom Tov of Shmini Atzeret. You're walking in the space, I'm not even touching my sukkah, I'm just going in, I'm eating there. This is not practical, this is the idea. For Chutz La'aretz, if you're going to be in the sukkah, okay, you like being in the sukkah, maybe that has to do more with that. But the lulav is a contradiction in terms. Holding the lulav in your hand on the 8th day means you're saying today's really the 7th day. So the Rav says, look at that Tosfot. That's the explanation of why the Rambam says we don't pick up the lulav and etrog on the 8th day, which is Safek Shvii, but we also consider it muktzah and we take our hands off it. It's a hisar from the days when Sfeika Diyoma actually meant Sfeika Diyoma. Ira, question.
But that concept of if I decide in July I want to sit in my sukkah, then it falls under the category. It's not a DIY then.
Well, that's a discussion from several years ago, and yes, it is. No, we did. We said though that remember there's a machloket on Daf Tet. The Mishnah Daf Tet debates: can you have a sukkah that was around from earlier in the year or not? And the halacha really follows Beit Hillel says yes, as long as you made it l'shem tzeil, good enough. Remember Sukkot Ganbach and Rav Kash, all these different sukkahs that we had. It's these acronyms: Ganbach. The sukkah made by this one. Rav Kash, the Rav Kash ones really wanted to apply. They're made for other purposes, but if it's made l'shem sale, Beit Hillel says it's okay. Tosfot on Daf Tet Amud Aleph, and the Gemara there said on that Mishnah said we have a Yerushalmi that says you have to be mechadesh badavar. So we try to lift something up in the schach.
The issue came up with a retractable roof. So therefore, we had said that if you had a retracted, then it would be okay, because then it's not a dirai right at that point.
The arai part of the sukkah turns out to be the fact that you have schach that is not attached in a fixed way, if at all, to the top of it. That's what makes the dirai arai. So a retractable roof. When you put down the schach, you roll it out. That's what's making the dirai arai. We said the walls can be made out of stone, which is strange. Like, how's that a dirat arai? Because the dirat arai part, sukkah, as Rashi says right at the beginning of the Masechta, sukkah is the word schach, is sukkah. So that's really what typifies the sukkah. The Rambam disagreed. He thought the walls were part of it. Okay, Adkan, we're over time. But I hope you enjoyed this. This is sort of, I guess, right now, I think I did not make a mistake any further. No, now I'm good. So now we're up to date. Next week when we get together, please be here next week. Very exciting shir. I don't say that every week. You know that. Very exciting shir. we're going to get to Shmini Safek Shvii Be'inyan Sukka, sitting in the Sukka on Shmini Atzeret. The whole headquarters of the Sugya right here. And very exciting. I can't wait. We're going to see the Gemara. We'll see Rashi, Tosfot, the Ritva, and whoever else I gave you here. More stuff, I think, from the Rav. Amazing Torahs. We're going to get to it, that and more. Come back next week. That's all I have time for now. Have a great night. Sei gesund. Be well, everybody. See you.